Princess Zarathel Vex stood on the crystal balcony of the royal palace, watching the purple clouds swirl far below. Her world, Calther Prime, floated high above poisonous gases that had once nearly killed her people. Now those same toxic clouds powered their great cities through massive energy collectors. Everything about Caltharian life showed their ability to turn danger into strength. The princess touched the crystal formations growing from her pale blue skin. Each crystal marked her royal blood and her warrior training. At 25 Earth years old, she had never lost a fight. She had never failed at anything. Until today. Princess, your father requests your presence in the council chamber. The servant's voice shook slightly. Everyone knew why the emperor had called this meeting. Zarathel walked through the floating palace corridors. Energy bridges connected each section, glowing like captured starlight. Servants and nobles bowed as she passed. Their minds touched hers briefly through telepathic contact, sharing emotions of worry and fear. Something was very wrong in the empire. The council chamber stretched wide enough to hold 1,000 people. 12 ancient crystal formations grew from the floor, each one home to a council member who had lived for centuries. Emperor Vorthak Vex sat at the center, his massive frame covered in the dark crystals that marked his age and power. "Daughter," he said, his mental voice reaching her thoughts. "Come forward." Zarathel walked to the center of the room. The council members watched her with eyes like glowing gems. She had seen them make decisions about wars, trade agreements, and the fate of entire worlds. Today felt different. The humans continued to expand, her father began, speaking aloud for the formal record. They have taken 12 systems that border our territory. Yesterday, they destroyed our fleet at Kepler Station. Zarathel felt shock ripple through the chamber. The Caltharian fleet had never lost a major battle. Their ships used technology perfected over thousands of years. Their tactics came from military schools that trained only the best minds in the galaxy. "How is this possible?" she asked. "They do not fight as we expected," said Council Member Thexara, her ancient voice bitter with confusion. "Our battle computers predicted every logical strategy. The humans used none of them. They turned cargo ships into weapons," added another council member. "They used asteroids as shields. They made our own formation work against us. It should not have been possible." Emperor Vorthak stood, his crystals catching the chamber's light. "We face a choice, daughter. War with the humans will cost us millions of lives. Our scientists estimate a 30% chance of victory. These odds are unacceptable." Zarathel felt cold despite the warm crystal formations around her. "What is the alternative?" "Marriage," her father said simply. "You will marry their military leader, Captain Jake Morrison. This union will create a peace treaty between our peoples." The words hit her like a physical blow. Marriage to an alien. Marriage to a human. The telepathic network in the chamber buzzed with emotions from the council members. Fear, uncertainty, and something else that confused her. Respect for the humans they claimed to be inferior. "Father, I am a warrior princess of the Caltharian Empire. I have trained my entire life to serve our people in battle. How can I marry a primitive human?" "Because that primitive human defeated our best admiral," her father replied. "Because his people have done in 50 years what took us 5,000. Because we may have underestimated them completely." Zarathel had studied other alien species. Most were either too weak to matter or too similar to the Caltharians to be interesting. Humans seemed different. They came from a world that tried to kill them every day. They fought each other constantly, yet somehow worked together when facing outside threats. They had no telepathic abilities, no crystal technology, no genetic modifications. By every logical measure, they should have remained trapped on their home planet. Instead, they had built starships from metal and chemical fuel. They had created artificial intelligence that helped them navigate space. They had formed governments that somehow held together despite their differences. None of it made sense according to Caltharian knowledge. "Have you studied their military records?" she asked. "Yes," said Council Member Vorthak, the Empire's greatest military mind. "They should have lost every battle they fought. Their ships are slower than ours. Their weapons are less powerful. Their armor is weaker. Yet they win. How? They change their tactics during battle. They use their weaknesses as strengths. They make decisions that our computers call impossible, then prove the computers wrong." Zarathel walked to the great window that showed the floating cities of her homeworld. Energy bridges connected hundreds of crystal spires in perfect geometric patterns. Everything followed the plan created by their ancestors. Everything had its place and purpose. What do we know about this Captain Morrison? He is 32 years old. He commanded the human fleet at Kepler Station. Before that, he served on Earth's defense forces during their civil conflicts. His military record shows consistent success against larger, better-equipped enemies. His weaknesses? Unknown. Human psychology remains a mystery to our scientists. The Emperor approached his daughter. Zarathel, I would not ask this of you if I saw another way. But our empire faces a new kind of enemy. An enemy that might become an ally. If we can bridge the gap between our peoples. She turned to face the council. If I agree to this marriage, what guarantees do we have? The humans have proposed a trial period, her father explained. You and Captain Morrison will spend time together on neutral ground. If the marriage proves impossible, both sides will seek other solutions to our conflict. And if I refuse, then we prepare for a war we might not win. Zarathel closed her eyes and reached out with her telepathic senses. She felt the emotions of everyone in the chamber. Fear dominated their thoughts. Fear of the unknown. Fear of losing everything their civilization had built. Fear of humans who fought like no enemy they had ever faced. But beneath the fear, she sensed something else. Curiosity. These ancient, wise council members were curious about humans. That fact troubled her more than anything else they had said. I will need to study everything we know about human culture and military tactics, she said finally. You accept? Her father asked. I accept the responsibility to serve my people, she replied. Whether that leads to marriage or war remains to be seen. The council members shared their relief through the telepathic network. Emperor Vorthak nodded with approval. The ceremony will take place in 60 days on the neutral world of Nexus. Use that time wisely, daughter. As Zarathel left the council chamber, her mind raced with questions. What kind of person was this Jake Morrison? How did humans think so differently from her people? And most importantly, how had a species without telepathy, without crystal technology, without any of the advantages her people possessed, managed to make the mighty Caltharian Empire consider peace instead of conquest? She would find her answers. And then she would decide whether to save her people through marriage or prepare them for a war unlike any they had ever fought. Captain Jake Morrison stepped off his shuttle onto Harmony Point, the massive space station that served as neutral ground for meetings between different alien species. The station stretched for miles in every direction, its corridors wide enough for the largest alien visitors and its atmosphere carefully balanced to support dozens of different life forms. Admiral Lisa Kane walked beside him, reviewing their diplomatic protocols on a small tablet. Remember, Jake, the Caltharians expect formal behavior. They bow to show respect. They speak in careful, measured sentences. They consider casual conversation to be disrespectful. Got it, Jake replied, adjusting his dress uniform. Be formal, be respectful, and try not to start a war by accident. I'm serious about this. One wrong move could mean millions of deaths. Jake nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He had spent the last month studying everything humanity knew about Caltharian culture. Their society operated like a perfect machine, with everyone knowing their exact place and purpose. They valued predictability, tradition, and logical thinking above all else. It sounded incredibly boring to him. The greeting chamber was enormous, its ceiling painted with star maps from across the galaxy. Caltharian diplomats stood in perfect formation near the center of the room. Their blue skin caught the light from crystal formations that grew from their bodies, making them look like living sculptures. At the front of the group stood Princess Zarathel Vex. Jake had seen pictures, but meeting her in person was different. She was tall, nearly matching his 6-foot height, with elegant features and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. The crystals growing from her skin formed complex patterns that spoke of royal blood and warrior training. She carried herself like someone who had never been defeated. The Caltharian ambassador, an elderly male named Thexoro, stepped forward. Captain Morrison, we welcome you to Harmony Point. It is customary for visitors to show respect to Princess Zarathel by bowing. Jake looked at the princess, then at the assembled diplomats. Every human instinct told him to follow protocol, to bow, to make this meeting go smoothly. Instead, he walked directly to Zarathel and extended his hand. Princess, it's an honor to meet you. I'm Jake Morrison. The chamber fell silent. Caltharian telepaths shared shocked emotions that Jake could feel even without their mental abilities. Admiral Kane looked like she wanted to drag him away before he caused a diplomatic disaster. Zarathel stared at his outstretched hand for several seconds. Then, to everyone's surprise, she reached out and shook it. "Captain Morrison," she said in English, her accent strange but clear, "you do not bow to royalty." "Not unless they've earned it through their actions," Jake replied. "From what I've heard, you've earned plenty of respect, but I'd rather get to know you as a person before we worry about titles." The princess tilted her head slightly, studying him. "This is not how we expected you to behave." "Good," Jake said with a small smile. Predictable people are easy to defeat in battle. Over the next hour, they followed formal introduction protocols. Jake met each Caltharian diplomat, learned their names and positions, and listened to speeches about the importance of peace between their peoples. But his attention kept returning to Zarathel, who watched him with the intensity of a predator studying prey. During a break in the ceremonies, she approached him. "Captain, I have studied your military records. You should have lost every battle you fought." "Maybe we're just lucky," Jake replied. "Luck does not account for consistent success against superior forces. You must have a strategy we do not understand." Jake looked around the chamber, noting how the Caltharians stood in perfect formation, how they moved with calculated precision, how everything they did followed ancient patterns. "Can I ask you something, Princess?" "Yes." "What's the last thing your people did that surprised you?" Zarathel considered the question for a long moment. "I do not understand." "When did someone in your empire do something unexpected? Something that made you think differently about a problem? Our society values predictability. Surprises lead to chaos, and chaos leads to opportunities," Jake said. "At least that's how humans see it." That evening, they attended a formal dinner with both diplomatic teams. The Caltharian nobles had arranged the seating according to complex social rules that reflected rank, age, and political position. Jake found himself surrounded by ancient diplomats who spoke in careful, measured phrases about trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Halfway through the meal, one of the Caltharians presented Jake with an ancient puzzle, a crystal formation that could be manipulated into thousands of different shapes. "This puzzle has challenged our greatest minds for centuries," the noble explained. "We are curious to see how human intelligence approaches such problems." Jake accepted the crystal formation and turned it over in his hands. The other humans at the table watched nervously, knowing this was some kind of test. The Caltharians observed with the detached interest of scientists studying a laboratory specimen. Instead of trying to solve the puzzle immediately, Jake set it aside and continued eating. "Captain," said the Caltharian noble, "do you not wish to attempt the challenge?" "Sure," Jake replied, taking another bite of the strange but delicious alien food. "But first, tell me about this puzzle. Who made it? Why was it created? What's it supposed to represent?" The noble seemed confused by the questions. "It is a test of logical thinking and spatial awareness. But why does it exist? What problem was the creator trying to solve?" "It is a puzzle. A mental exercise." Jake nodded and picked up the crystal formation again, but instead of trying to manipulate it into a specific shape, he handed it to Admiral Kane. "Lisa, what do you think this looks like?" She studied it briefly. "Some kind of flower, maybe?" Jake passed it to another human diplomat. "Bill? Looks like a star to me. Sarah? It reminds me of my daughter's art project." Jake turned back to the Caltharian noble. "Your people created this puzzle to find the one correct solution. Humans see a dozen different possibilities in the same object. Maybe the real challenge isn't solving the puzzle. Maybe it's realizing that there might be more than one right answer." Princess Zarathel leaned forward in her chair. "Explain." "Your people think in straight lines," Jake said, holding up the crystal formation. "Point A to point B following logical steps. Humans think in curves, spirals, and sometimes we jump directly from point A to point Q without touching anything in between." "That is inefficient," observed the Caltharian noble. "Sometimes," Jake agreed. "Other times it's the only way to find solutions that logical thinking can't reach." As the dinner continued, Jake gradually turned the formal event into something resembling a casual conversation. He asked questions about Caltharian families, their hobbies, their personal interests. He shared stories about Earth, about human customs that made no logical sense but somehow worked anyway. The Caltharians seemed confused but intrigued. Their telepathic abilities let them sense Jake's genuine interest in their culture, even when he broke every social rule they knew. Later, as the evening ended, Zarathel walked with Jake through one of the station's observation decks. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the transparent walls, and ships from a dozen different species docked at various ports. "You are not what I expected," she said finally. "What did you expect? A barbarian, a primitive warrior who succeeded through luck and brutality. Sorry to disappoint you." "You did not disappoint me," she replied, her tone thoughtful. "You confused me. Your people defeated our fleet using strategies that our best military minds called impossible. Yet you seem more interested in conversation than conquest." Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. "Princess, can I be honest with you?" "Yes?" "I don't want this marriage any more than you do. I didn't join the military to become a political symbol. But I also don't want our peoples to destroy each other in a war that nobody can really win. What do you propose?" "I propose we figure out if we can work together," Jake said. "Not as enemies forced into an alliance, but as partners who might actually accomplish something neither of our peoples could do alone." Zarathel studied his face, her crystal formations catching the starlight. "You believe cooperation is possible between our species? I think your people are incredibly advanced and incredibly smart. I think my people are adaptable and creative. Combine those qualities and we might surprise ourselves. And if cooperation proves impossible, then at least we'll know we tried," Jake replied. "And maybe we'll understand each other well enough to find a peaceful solution that doesn't involve marriage or war." The princess nodded slowly. "Very well, Captain Morrison. We will attempt this partnership. But I warn you, if you prove to be the barbarian I initially expected, our agreement ends immediately." Jake smiled. "Fair enough. And if you prove to be the arrogant alien princess I expected, the same goes for me." For the first time since they met, Zarathel smiled back. "Perhaps we will both be surprised." The human fleet was nothing like what Princess Zarathel had expected. As her shuttle approached the colony ship Endeavor, she saw vessels that looked more like floating cities than military craft. They were massive, ungainly, and covered with strange additions that seemed to have been built as afterthoughts. "Your ships appear to be constructed from spare parts," she observed to Captain Jake Morrison, who sat beside her as they flew through the human formation. "That's because they are," Jake replied cheerfully. "We build our ships to be modified, upgraded, and repaired in the field. Form follows function, and our function changes depending on what problems we need to solve. This approach seems inefficient. Maybe, but it means we can turn a cargo ship into a warship in a few hours if we need to. Your ships are beautiful and powerful, but they can only do the jobs they were designed for." The shuttle docked with the Endeavor, and Zarathel stepped into a corridor that buzzed with activity. Humans moved in every direction, carrying equipment, discussing problems, and making constant small adjustments to their surroundings. The noise level would have been overwhelming for most Caltharians who preferred quiet, ordered environments. Commander Rex Palmer met them at the airlock. He was shorter than Jake, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. "Welcome aboard the Endeavor, Princess. Fair warning, we're not much for formal ceremonies here." "I have noticed," Zarathel replied, watching a maintenance crew work on a power conduit while people walked around them. "Do your people always work in such chaos?" "This isn't chaos," Rex said with a grin. "Chaos is what happens when pirates attack us. This is just Tuesday." Jake led her through the ship, showing her the engineering sections, crew quarters, and command center. Everything seemed to be in constant motion. Humans adapted their workspaces moment by moment, moving equipment and changing procedures based on immediate needs. "How do you maintain efficiency without standardized procedures?" Zarathel asked. "We do have standards," Jake explained, stopping at an observation window that showed the ship's main engineering bay. "But we also train our people to think for themselves. When something unexpected happens, they don't wait for orders from headquarters. They solve the problem and report what they did. What if they make mistakes? Then they learn from them and do better next time." This concept disturbed Zarathel deeply. Caltharian society worked because everyone followed proven procedures developed over thousands of years. Individuals who made independent decisions created unpredictable results, and unpredictable results led to failure. Yet somehow, human unpredictability had defeated the Caltharian fleet at Kepler Station. That afternoon, Jake shared human history with her in his private quarters. The room was small but comfortable, with pictures of Earth landscapes and shelves filled with actual paper books. Zarathel had never seen physical books before. Her people stored all information in crystal memory systems. This is where we come from, Jake said, showing her images of Earth on his computer screen. A planet that's tried to kill us since we first developed intelligence. Diseases, natural disasters, climate changes, resource shortages. Our homeworld taught us that survival means adapting to constant challenges. Your people faced extinction many times? Dozens of times. We've fought each other, poisoned our environment, and made every possible mistake while learning how to build a civilization. But we survived because we learned to work together when facing threats bigger than our differences. Zarathel studied an image of Earth's cities, chaotic collections of buildings in dozens of different styles, connected by transportation networks that seem to have grown organically rather than being planned. Your civilization appears to lack central organization. We have governments and laws, Jake said, but we also have thousands of different cultures, languages, and ways of thinking. Most alien species find this confusing, but it's actually our greatest strength. How can diversity be strength? Uniformity creates efficiency and predictability. Jake pulled up another image, a Caltharian city with its perfect crystal spires and geometric patterns. Your cities are beautiful, Princess. They represent incredible engineering and artistic achievement. But tell me, when did your people last invent something completely new? The question caught her off guard. We continuously improve our technology. Improve, yes. But when did someone create something that didn't exist before? Something that solved a problem in a way no one had ever considered? Zarathel thought carefully. Caltharian technology had reached a peak of perfection centuries ago. Since then, their scientists had focused on refinement and optimization rather than innovation. Innovation often leads to instability, and instability leads to adaptation, and adaptation leads to solutions that stable societies can't imagine. Before she could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Jake's communicator came alive with urgent voices reporting contacts on long-range sensors. The princess followed him to the command center, where humans worked frantically at their stations. "Report," Jake called out as they entered. 12 ships approaching from the asteroid belt, Commander Palmer announced. Configuration matches known pirate vessels. They're not responding to communication attempts. Time to intercept? 40 minutes. Jake moved to the central command station and activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Captain Morrison. We have hostile contacts approaching. Implement defensive formation Delta 7. Zarathel watched the human fleet respond to his orders. But instead of forming the predictable defensive patterns she expected, the ships moved into positions that seemed random and disorganized. "Captain," she said quietly, "your formation exposes several vessels to concentrated attack." "I know," Jake replied, studying the tactical display. "Palmer, what do we have for improvised weapons?" Engineering reports they can turn the mining lasers on ships 3 and 7 into something resembling military-grade weapons. The cargo ships can deploy their loading manipulators as close-range defense systems. Do it, and get me a list of everything in our cargo holds that might be useful in a fight. "Jake," Admiral Kane's voice came over the communicator from her ship. "The princess is watching. Maybe we should use standard defensive procedures." "Standard procedures are what pirates expect," Jake replied. "Princess, would you mind sharing what you know about our attackers?" Zarathel was surprised by the request. "You wish me to assist?" "If you're willing. Your tactical knowledge might help us save lives." She moved to the sensor station and studied the approaching ships. These appeared to be modified Zarion raiders. They typically attack in waves using superior speed to isolate individual targets. What are their weaknesses? They rely on hit-and-run tactics. If forced into a prolonged engagement, their lighter armor becomes a disadvantage. Jake nodded and turned back to his crew. "Change of plans. We're going to make them come to us, and we're going to make it expensive." Over the next 30 minutes, Zarathel watched Jake coordinate a defense using damaged ships, civilian vessels, and improvised weapons. He turned cargo containers into missile platforms, used the fleet's mining equipment as weapons, and positioned his ship so that the pirates would have to fight through a maze of obstacles to reach their targets. When the attack began, nothing went according to standard military doctrine. Human ships moved unpredictably, changing their tactics moment by moment as the situation developed. Cargo vessels fought alongside military craft. Civilian crews operated weapons they had never trained with. It should have been a disaster. Instead, it was a victory. The pirates, expecting a conventional battle against a standard defensive formation, found themselves fighting an enemy that broke every rule they knew. Human ships that appeared defenseless suddenly revealed hidden weapons. Vessels that seemed to be fleeing led attackers into carefully prepared traps. Within 2 hours, the pirate fleet was retreating, having lost 6 ships without destroying a single human vessel. How? Zarathel asked as the command center celebrated around them. We made them fight our kind of battle instead of their kind, Jake explained. They had better ships and more experience. But they were thinking in straight lines while we were thinking in spirals. That evening, as both fleets continued toward the neutral world of Nexus, Zarathel found herself walking through the Endeavor's corridors again. This time she paid attention to different details. She noticed how humans worked together without formal hierarchy when solving problems. She saw how they modified their equipment and procedures based on immediate needs. She observed how they treated challenges as opportunities rather than threats. Most importantly, she began to understand why the Caltharian fleet had lost at Kepler Station. Her people fought battles the way they did. Everything else, following proven procedures developed through careful analysis and logical planning. Humans fought the way they lived, adapting, improvising, and creating solutions that no computer could predict. In her quarters aboard the Caltharian flagship that night, Zarathel composed a message to her father. She described what she had learned about human tactics, human society, and human thinking. She explained how their apparent weaknesses were actually strengths that her people had never encountered before. But most importantly, she wrote about Jake Morrison himself. The Crystal Cathedral on Nexus was unlike anything Jake Morrison had ever seen. The massive structure existed partially in normal space and partially in hyperspace, creating walls that seemed to be made of captured starlight. Floating platforms surrounded the central altar, where representatives from dozens of alien species had gathered to witness the marriage between human and Caltharian. Princess Zarathel stood beside him, wearing traditional Caltharian ceremonial robes that enhanced the natural crystal formations growing from her skin. Jake wore his dress uniform, modified with small crystal decorations that honored her culture. They had spent weeks planning this ceremony, combining traditions from both their peoples into something entirely new. Nervous? Jake asked quietly as the alien diplomats took their places. Terrified, Zarathel replied, but she smiled as she said it. Are human weddings always this complicated? Usually they're worse, Jake said. At least we don't have to worry about drunk relatives embarrassing us. The ceremony began with Caltharian traditions. Emperor Vorthak Vex spoke about the joining of 2 bloodlines and the responsibilities of marriage. Zarathel placed her hand on an ancient crystal that had belonged to her family for generations, promising to honor her ancestors while building a new future. Then came the human elements. Admiral Kane read passages about partnership and mutual respect from Earth's various cultural traditions. Jake placed a simple gold ring on Zarathel's finger, a human custom that his people had practiced for thousands of years. But the most important part was what they added together. Instead of simply exchanging predetermined vows, Jake and Zarathel spoke words they had written themselves, creating promises that belonged to neither culture but to both. I promise to learn from your strengths while sharing my own, Jake said, looking directly into her luminous eyes. I promise to respect your traditions while building new ones with you. And I promise to face whatever challenges come with the knowledge that we're stronger together than either of us could be alone. Zarathel took his hands in hers, her crystals glowing softly in the cathedral's strange light. I promise to embrace change without abandoning wisdom. I promise to find new solutions to old problems. And I promise to build a future where our differences create strength rather than division. The assembled diplomats watched in fascination as the ceremony concluded with a ritual that neither species had ever performed before. Jake and Zarathel each contributed a drop of blood to a crystal formation that would grow throughout their marriage, becoming a living symbol of their union. As they kissed to seal their vows, the telepathic Caltharians in the audience experienced something unprecedented, a brief moment of perfect emotional connection between 2 beings from different species. The sensation spread through the crowd, creating a shared understanding that transcended words or cultural barriers, but their moment of triumph was interrupted by urgent communication from the orbital platform surrounding Nexus. Captain Morrison came, Admiral. Kane's voice through his communicator. We have a problem. Jake and Zarathel were escorted to the cathedral's communication center, where representatives from both their governments waited with grave expressions. The celebration was forgotten as they listened to reports of ships gathering in nearby systems. "A faction of Caltharian nobles has declared your marriage illegitimate," reported Council Member Thexara, her ancient features twisted with worry. "They claim the princess has been contaminated by human influence and can no longer serve the Empire." "How many ships do they have?" Zarathel asked. 47 vessels, including several of our most advanced warships. They are led by your uncle, Prince Korthax." Jake studied the tactical displays showing ship movements throughout the sector. "It's not just Caltharians. I'm seeing human vessels moving to intercept positions as well." "Some of our own people think this marriage is a betrayal," Admiral Kane admitted. "They believe we're surrendering to alien influence instead of asserting human independence. So now we have enemies on both sides," Jake said grimly. "The rebel fleets will reach Nexus in 18 hours, Thexara reported. The planet's defenses cannot withstand a coordinated attack from both human and Caltharian forces." Zarathel moved to the tactical display, studying the approaching ships with the eye of a trained warrior. "They intend to eliminate us before our marriage can influence others. If we die here, both governments can claim we were victims of extremists while secretly supporting the rebels. Can we get word to our loyalist forces?" Jake asked. "Not without revealing our position to the rebels," Admiral Kane replied. "Any transmission we send will be intercepted." "Then we run," Jake decided. "Load essential personnel onto the fastest ships and head for neutral space." "No," Zarathel said firmly. "If we flee, we prove their point that our marriage was a mistake. We need to stay and fight. With what? We have 12 ships against nearly 100. "We have something they don't expect," she replied, a smile growing on her face. "We have each other." Over the next few hours, Jake and Zarathel worked together to plan their defense of Nexus. They combined Caltharian strategic thinking with human tactical flexibility, creating a battle plan that neither species could have developed alone. They turned the planet's civilian infrastructure into military assets. The orbital platforms became weapon platforms. The tourist ships became decoy targets. The crystal formations that powered the planet's cities became the basis for an energy weapon that could disable attacking vessels without destroying them. Most importantly, they convinced the mixed crews of humans and Caltharians to work together in ways their species had never attempted before. Human creativity guided Caltharian precision. Caltharian planning supported human improvisation. When the rebel fleets arrived, they found a defense that defied every assumption they had made. Ships that should have been easy targets fought with coordinated efficiency. Weapons that appeared primitive proved devastatingly effective. Most confusing of all, human and Caltharian forces worked together as if they had trained for years instead of hours. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, both rebel fleets were retreating, their leaders captured or dead. Prince Korthax himself was taken prisoner when his flagship was disabled by a weapon that combined human engineering with Caltharian energy technology. But the victory came at a cost. Jake and Zarathel were now marked as fugitives by extremists in both their governments. They could not return home safely until the political situation stabilized. "Where do we go now?" Jake asked as they stood in the cathedral where they had been married just hours before. The beautiful structure showed damage from the battle, its crystal walls cracked and several floating platforms destroyed. "We build something new," Zarathel replied, looking at the mixed crews of humans and Caltharians who had fought together to defend their world. "These people have proven that cooperation between our species is possible. We find a place where we can continue that work. A colony? A demonstration. We show both our peoples what they could accomplish if they stopped fearing each other and started working together." Jake nodded, understanding what she meant. Their marriage had begun as a political necessity, but it had become something larger, a symbol of what their two species could achieve together. Over the following days, as they organized their evacuation from Nexus, Jake and Zarathel discovered that they were not alone. Hundreds of humans and Caltharians requested permission to join their colony, scientists who wanted to combine their knowledge, engineers who dreamed of building impossible projects, soldiers who had fought side by side and learned to trust each other. "Are we ready for this?" Jake asked on their last night on Nexus as they walked through the damaged but still beautiful crystal cathedral. "No," Zarathel replied honestly. But our peoples weren't ready for space travel when they first left their homeworlds. They weren't ready for interstellar war when they started fighting each other. Readiness is overrated. What matters is willingness to try. What matters is commitment to keep trying even when we fail. Jake took her hand, feeling the warmth of her crystal formations against his skin. Then let's go build a new world. As their ships departed Nexus the next morning, Jake and Zarathel looked back at the planet where their marriage had changed from a diplomatic arrangement into a true partnership. They were no longer representatives of their separate peoples. They were pioneers of something entirely new. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for the changes they intended to bring. 6 months after their wedding, Jake Morrison and Princess Zarathel stood on the observation deck of their colony ship, watching the sunrise over Haven. The planet was perfect for their purposes, rich in resources, strategically located, and far enough from both human and Caltharian space to provide safety while they built their new society. Below them, the colony had grown from a handful of temporary shelters into a thriving settlement of nearly 10,000 beings. Humans and Caltharians worked side by side in the fields, laboratories, and construction sites. Children of both species played together in schools that taught lessons from 2 different worlds. The farming project exceeded our projections again this month, Zarathel reported, reading from her daily briefing. Combining Caltharian soil enhancement with human crop rotation techniques increased yields by 30%. What about the manufacturing centers? Jake asked. The fusion of our technologies is producing results neither species achieved alone. The new Starship designs are 40% more efficient than previous human models and 30% faster than Caltharian equivalents. Jake smiled as he watched a group of human and Caltharian engineers arguing enthusiastically about some technical problem. Their arguments had become legendary throughout the colony, passionate, creative discussions that usually ended with breakthrough solutions that surprised everyone involved. Any word from our families? Zarathel's expression grew more serious. My father sends his regards and reports that support for our colony is growing among younger Caltharians. Your Admiral Kane says the same about humans, especially those in frontier territories. But the governments are still officially neutral? Officially, yes. Unofficially, both sides are watching very carefully to see if our experiment succeeds or fails. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the colony's communication center. Commander Rex Palmer appeared on the screen, his usually cheerful expression grim with concern. Jake, Zarathel, you need to see this. We've received long-range sensor data from our monitoring stations. Something big is heading this way. They hurried to the command center where a crowd of their best people had gathered around the main display. The image showed dozens of ships in an unfamiliar configuration approaching Haven's solar system. Identification? Jake asked. Unknown, replied Dr. Sarah Kim, their chief science officer. The ships don't match any design in our databases. They're larger than anything humans or Caltharians have built, and their technology signatures are completely foreign. Zarathel studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. These energy patterns, I have seen something like this in our oldest historical records, ships that belong to the Vorthani Empire. Who are the Vorthani? Jake asked. An ancient species that ruled this part of the galaxy thousands of years ago, Zarathel explained. They disappeared before my people developed space travel, but they left behind ruins on dozens of worlds. Most scholars believed they were extinct. Apparently not, Palmer said grimly. They'll reach our system in 72 hours. Intentions? Unknown, but they're not responding to our communication attempts. Jake and Zarathel exchanged looks. Their colony had been built as a peaceful demonstration of cooperation, not as a military stronghold. They had some defensive capabilities, but nothing that could stand against a fleet of unknown aliens with technology that predated both their civilizations. Options? Jake asked. We could evacuate, suggested Dr. Kim. Get our people to safety and abandon the colony. No, Zarathel said firmly. This colony represents hope for both our peoples. If we abandon it at the first sign of trouble, we prove that human-Caltharian cooperation is impossible under pressure. Then we need help, Jake decided. Palmer, open emergency channels to both Earth and Calthar Prime. Tell them we have a situation that threatens more than just our colony. Over the next day, as they prepared for the arrival of the mysterious fleet, something remarkable happened. Both the human and Caltharian governments responded to their call for help. Admiral Kane arrived with 12 human vessels, while Princess Zarathel's father sent a Caltharian task force under the command of her brother, Prince Thekmal. But most importantly, the colony's own population rallied to defend their new home. Humans and Caltharians who had spent months learning to work together now faced their first real test as a unified people. "Status report," Jake called as he entered the colony's main command center, which had been hastily expanded to accommodate representatives from all 3 fleets. "The unknown vessels have taken position at the edge of our system," Admiral Kane reported. "They're scanning everything, planets, moons, asteroids, our ships. But they still haven't responded to communication attempts. Our analysis suggests they're conducting some kind of survey," added Prince Thekmal, "perhaps evaluating our technological capabilities. Or deciding whether we're worth talking to," Jake said grimly. That decision came 12 hours later, when a single alien vessel detached itself from the main fleet and approached Haven. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, and covered with technology that seemed to bend space around itself. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. The main screen, filled with the image of a being unlike anything any of them had seen before. It was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to be made of liquid metal and eyes that held the depth of ancient wisdom. "I am Coordinator HFY of the Vorthani Empire," the being said in perfect English, though its mouth didn't seem to match the words. "We have been monitoring this system since your species began their expansion into space." "Coordinator," Jake replied, stepping forward as the colony's representative. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. This is Princess Zarathel Vex. We welcome you to Haven and hope we can establish peaceful relations." "Peaceful relations," the coordinator repeated, as if testing the words. "An interesting concept. Your species, both of them, have shown remarkable progress in a very short time, but also remarkable destructiveness. We're working to change that," Zarathel said. "This colony represents a new approach to interstellar civilization. Yes, we have observed your experiment with great interest. The question is whether this cooperation represents evolution or merely a temporary alliance of convenience." The alien's image shifted, showing holographic displays of battles throughout human and Caltharian space, wars, conflicts, and territorial disputes that had raged for decades. "Your peoples have proven capable of innovation and adaptation," Coordinator HFY continued, "but you have also proven capable of enormous destruction. The Vorthani Empire faced a similar choice thousands of years ago." "What choice?" Jake asked. "Whether to continue our expansion and risk destroying everything we encountered, or to withdraw and allow younger species to find their own paths. We chose withdrawal, but we have continued to watch." The display changed to show images of Haven, the colony, the mixed population, the joint projects that had created new technologies and new solutions to old problems. "Your colony suggests that cooperation between species is possible. But one small settlement is not sufficient proof. We require a larger demonstration." "What kind of demonstration?" Zarathel asked. "Your 2 species face a new threat," the coordinator explained. "A species called the Destructors has begun expanding into this galactic region. They consume resources, destroy civilizations, and leave nothing behind but empty space. They will reach human and Caltharian territories within 5 years." The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. A threat large enough to concern an ancient empire like the Vorthani would be beyond anything either humans or Caltharians could handle alone. "You want us to fight this threat together," Jake said. "We want you to prove that your cooperation is real and permanent," the coordinator replied. "If you can unite your peoples against a common enemy, we will share the technology and knowledge you need to defeat the Destructors. If you cannot, then we will withdraw again and leave you to face them alone." "How much time do we have?" Zarathel asked. 1 year to convince your governments to work together. 2 years to prepare your defenses. 3 years to prove you can function as a unified civilization." After the transmission ended, Jake and Zarathel found themselves alone on the observation deck where they had started their day. The sun was setting over Haven, painting the sky in colors that existed on no other world they knew. "Can we do it?" Jake asked. "Can we really convince our peoples to work together on this scale? 6 months ago I would have said no," Zarathel replied. Today, looking at what we've built here, I think we have to try. Even if we fail. Especially if we fail. Because if we don't try, both our civilizations will face extinction. And if we do try and succeed, we'll have built something neither of our peoples could have achieved alone. Jake took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her crystal formations. Then let's go save the galaxy. Together? Together. As the stars came out over Haven, Jake and Zarathel began planning their greatest challenge yet, not just saving their own peoples, but proving to an ancient empire that young species could evolve beyond their destructive instincts and create something worthy of the stars. Their forced marriage had become a true partnership. Now that partnership would become the foundation for a new kind of galactic